I started my company a little bit different. I was like, I want to do something that brings me passion, brings me joy, aligned with my values, and centered to my purpose. And I want to work on this every day. But I think because I didn't put that pressure on myself and I was literally just leaning in with like focus on my values and my purpose, it felt fun. I had to learn that everything's not black and white and that there's beauty in color. And so when I started this brand, I wanted people to be rooted in culture and to be rooted in who they were and to know that this is a brand that sees them, believes in them, and hears them. If you don't know who you are, then anyone can come in and tell you who you are. Hi, this is Jasmin Foster, and you are listening to Dreams and Drive.
Hey, Dream Drivers, welcome to episode 351 of the Dreams and Drive podcast. Super excited for you all to hear from this week's guest, Jasmin Foster. So recognizing that there was a gap in the market for a brand that spoke to her, Jasmin launched Be Rooted, an inclusive stationery and homeware brand in 2020 with a mission to empower women of color and create a space for them to see themselves in the stationery they loved. She really leaned into her passion for inclusivity and a desire to live a purpose-filled life, and now she has a lineup of colorful journals, planners, and writing instruments, and more designed by Black and brown artists. And this is what I really think is impressive about Jasmin's story. So she went from being an intern at Target to being a buyer at Target to then leaving Target and working with other small businesses, and then came back to Target in this way. By 2021, Be Rooted became the first and only Black-owned stationery brand available at retail giant Target and Target.com. So this is a story of a determined, smart, ambitious, and didn't yet know it at the time, entrepreneurial woman, and how she was able to put this dream of seeing stationery that spoke to her come to life. I'm really excited for you all to hear from Jasmin, and she just has so much practical tips about how you too can start enacting your dream driving journey and start crossing things off your to-do list and start putting some dreams into motion. If this is your first time listening, please make sure that you're following us. You can find us at Dreams and Drive, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and make sure you also sign up for our email newsletter, The Keys, and get weekly email updates right to your inbox. Just go to dreamsanddrive.com/join. That's dreamsanddrive.com/join to sign up. All right, let's hear from Jasmin.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited about this conversation.
I am super excited to be here. It's funny because I was looking at my bookcase the other day and I was like, wait, I have a Be Rooted journal. I didn't buy it, but I think someone must have given it to me in a gift bag or something. And I'm like, wait, look how the world comes full circle, because here I am interviewing the founder of Be Rooted on my show today. But before we get into your journey to entrepreneurship, Jasmin, I love to take it back in time, right? I think it's really important for us to reflect on who we were as children. I'm a big fan of like going back into childhood. I would love to know, what was the young 8-year-old Jasmin dreaming about? What was inspiring you as a kid?
So when I was a kid, I actually moved around a lot. My dad was in the Army, so we lived in a lot of different places. And when I grew up in Indianapolis, Indiana, I always just felt like there was just like so much of the world that I wanted to explore. So I had lived in like Italy, I had lived in Germany when I was a kid, and then kind of landing in the Midwest, I just dreamed of like having a job that would like allow me to like immerse into culture and like travel and like see all of the things. And I really, really wanted to tap into my creative brain, but like was not gifted with the ability to like paint or do any of those things. But I was very like ingenuitive as a kid, being an only child. Like I remember teaching myself how to like play Foursquare by myself, which if you've ever played Foursquare, intentionally you're supposed to have 4 people, but your girl taught herself how to do it by herself because I didn't believe in limitations. And I always was just like trying to come up with new fun things to do with my time.
That's so interesting because, looking at where you are now, learning how to do different roles and learning how to figure things out is kind of, still a thread, right? For you today.
Absolutely.
So, thinking about like, did you have a dream, right? I remember as a kid, for me, it's funny because I found one of these little when I want to grow up. Actually, it's fun because it's funny. My son today, he's 2.5. He told me he wants to be a transport truck driver when he grows up, right? And I was like, what about an engineer, right? And he was just like, okay, for trains. And then there was this moment where I posted it on social media. My cousin was like, I'm Jamaican. And so he was like, Raina, you're starting the Jamaican indoctrination. Let the kid let him be a driver if he wants to be a transport truck driver, right? For you, did you have any big dreams? And then what did the people in your life think about those dreams that you had as a kid?
I always had a lot of different dreams, but I was that kid that was going to push myself to be the best at whatever it was. And so I was always like picking up new things. So I remember in middle school, like I was really into words and I had won a couple of spelling bees. And so I decided to pick up like competitive Scrabbling. Like who does competitive Scrabbling? Like I literally competed across other, middle school teams with Scrabble. And like I would study my Scrabble handbook and the rules and all the trick words. I mean, we made the state and we won, but like that was something. And then I was playing basketball and my coach was like, yeah, you need to do something else on the off season. He was like, have you tried track? And I'm like, I'm not running. And then he was like, well, there's field as well. And so I picked up shot put and out of nowhere and then like trained myself to be really good and end up going to state for shot put, and so like anything that I've ever like set my mind to as a kid, I was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to be the best at it.
I love that.
And so like from Scrabble to shot put to cheerleading to basketball, like whatever it was, like I would like get myself just so focused on it and would figure out how to like master that craft. And I think that that's definitely an attitude that I've taken with me into like almost any environment that I'm in.
How did you view failure when you were younger? I say that just because, I, like you, I was like very smart, very ambitious. I was also on track, but I was no good. I wanted to be good. Like, girl, I studied. I did all of it. My legs just never went as fast as I needed them to go, right? So for me, navigating things that I wasn't good at was hard, right? But do you remember how you navigated failure early on or when things didn't go right?
Yeah, I mean, I think from playing sports, you're not going to win always, right? And so I think sports taught me like it's always like the team effort. And when you fall down, you have to get back up the next time, right? And so I think that was definitely, I didn't know I was learning that lesson back then, but I think that's definitely one lesson going forward was that, you're going to make mistakes, but it's not about the mistake, it's about the get back.
Yeah, and you went to end up going to Indiana University, Bloomington, studied in business marketing. Was that the goal? Did you want to do that? Or was it one of those college stories where you're like, I guess I'll do this type of thing?
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I was in like this business program and this guy from Nike came to speak to us. And he told me about his job or told the class about his job. And he basically was one of the people in charge of making like Nike commercials. And back in the early 2000s, there was no cooler brand than Nike. And the commercials, like, I mean, everyone kind of remembers those commercials back then. And so I just decided that I was going to go to college and I was going to also be an advertiser and I was going to make cool commercials too, because I'm pretty funny and I have good ideas. And so when I got
confident, right? You got to be confident in that.
So when I got to college, I definitely like my plan was to like graduate with a marketing degree, move to New York, get 5 roommates, live in a 1-bedroom apartment because we were going to be broke because as an advertiser, you don't really make that much money and New York is very expensive. And I was going to go into like advertising. And then along the way in college, Target showed up to campus and they had like this little like night for sophomores, and they were telling us about the opportunity of like being a buyer. And the buyer is a person that gets to pick the products that go on shelf. And then they were also telling us what the starting salary was of being a buyer. And I was like, hold on, now this seems pretty cool too. And so my sophomore year, I ended up getting an internship at Target, working at the headquarters in Minneapolis. And that like forever changed the course of what I thought I was going to do after I graduated.
So let's pause there real quick. I think one theme that I hear that I think is really important for anyone is exposure, right? You heard about the Nike. We actually had someone who was on the show. He started at an intern at Nike and went up to like chief marketing officer. And he had that same story of how like he was so mesmerized by the brand. You have Target come in, that's exposure, right? Like there are things that you never knew about until someone introduced you to them. When it comes to how, like thinking back about that internship that you had with Target, what about it changed your life?
I literally never thought about how products got to shelf. And when you think about that, there's someone's job that dictates what ends up in the houses of millions of people, that to me seemed really cool from just like a psychology standpoint as well. Is like you as an end consumer are thinking that like you have the choice in your hand, and you do, but there's really someone else behind the scenes like curating the experience, right? And so you're only given a limited amount of items to pick from, and that person who's the buyer, that's their seat to do that. And their job is to find the coolest, most innovative stuff to put out to the world. And to me, that was a really, really, really cool and interesting job that was just a different spin on marketing. And Target is always been a store that like made me happy.
Doesn't it make everyone happy?
It just makes everyone happy. And, you know, growing up in the Midwest where we were having a lot of department stores close at the time. So there was like Lazarus and LS Airs and all those were going away and kind of.
I've never heard of those. They're not East Coast. I'm from the Jersey, New York City area, so I've never heard of it.
So those were a lot of our original department stores, and I believe Macy's ended up buying up a lot of them. So a lot of those were closing. And then there was, you know, your more traditional mass like Walmart was available, but Target kind of fit in that like sweet spot where it was like, if you didn't really have the money to go up to department stores, but you wanted something a little bit more special and unique than what maybe Walmart had to offer, like Target kind of played in that like amazing middle ground. Mm-hmm. And they were pretty new to them, at least in Indy when I was living there. And so it was just always a store that brought me joy.
What were you realizing at this point? Maybe it could have been in your internship before you graduated from college, what your unique like business skill sets or your unique like the skill sets that you were gaining during this time in your life? Because I do think college is transformative for us in a lot of ways, whether it's worth the money or not. That's another episode, right? But yes, there are things we learn about ourselves as people. So for you, what was that?
Yeah, I think what I learned on that internship is that like I have really good critical thinking skills, and I am really good at like taking a complex problem and like digesting it into bite-sizable, digestible pieces to solve. And I think even as I translate that back to business or people that I know that I want to be entrepreneurs, one thing that I think stops a lot of people is that like they have this grandiose idea and they can't figure out how to get from like where they are now to like this amazing company that they want to build. But what I tell people is that like you have to think about like what are those stepping stones in between that's going to get you to the amazing idea that you have. But it's really hard to build that amazing idea from day one. And I think that's how like in the internship and then early on in my career, I realized that like that was one of my kind of unique points of difference, is that like I could see the mountaintop, but build the steps to get there.
Let me know. Your memory might not be as good as mine, because I don't really remember either. But graduated from college, you have a cap and diploma on, right? What was the mountaintop that you saw for yourself?
The mountaintop at that point in time was more so about like moving away from home and like learning how to like be an adult on my own self. Because I always say college is not real.
It's not. Especially if you live on campus and you get food. If
You,
you get
you
food, you
live
go
on
to the
campus, you
cafeteria.
get food. I was an hour away from home. Like I
Me
could pop
too.
back, to see my mom's. She'd make like all these meals on Sunday and then like package me up stuff. Like it just wasn't real. So I think like at the graduation moment, I was less like concerned or thinking about like what's my big career moment, and I was more so about like it's time to adult. And do you have the chops to adult? Because like this is a big next step for you. I think that was much more what I was concerned about. And also, honestly, moving to Minneapolis, which was a predominantly, white city, that I didn't know anyone there besides people that I knew from the internship, and just adjusting to like what that culture would look like.
Ladies, we say period a lot, but do we ever talk about periods, aka our menstrual cycle? So I'm busy, I'm active, I'm always on the go, and sometimes pads just don't do it for me. I want to be able to move around and just feel, free. And here's the thing, a lot of us are scared of tampons and we don't have to be. So let me tell you why. When inserted properly, tampons shouldn't hurt. Like a pad, Tampax can absorb even your heavy flow and give you an up to 100% leak-free experience you can't see or feel. And growing up in our communities as a teen, I remember there being this whole stigma and taboo around girls who used tampons versus girls who didn't. So I didn't really have anyone to talk to about it. Now, as a 30-something-year-old, I'm like, no, let's talk about it. Tampax has me covered. Chill mode, check. Supermom mode, check. On the go mode, check. Tampax is always there for the different types of days I have. There is no right or wrong way to manage your period. I'm just saying, mix it up sometimes and try Tampax. Share your light with Michelle Obama and the Light Podcast. In this uplifting new Audible original series, Michelle Obama explores her belief that we all carry a light inside of us. Join the former First Lady as she discusses how to kindle that flame so that we can face life's challenges. Hear her connect with incredible friends and favorite personalities like Oprah Winfrey, Ellen DeGeneres, Conan O'Brien, Tyler Perry, David Letterman, and many more special guests. In each inspirational episode, you'll hear honest and important conversations about overcoming self-doubt, building support systems, tackling issues of race, gender, and visibility, and creating pathways for progress. It's the perfect podcast for today's hectic times. Michelle Obama brings the humor, sincerity, and compassion we all need. Go high even when the world feels low with the former First Lady and the icon, artists, and thinkers you know and love. Listen free at the home of storytelling, audible.com/yourlight. So was your first job out of college at a Target?
Yes, it was.
Okay. So you started at Target there, and I know that you started as an intern, then you went on to your LinkedIn says senior business analyst, right?
Mm-hmm.
Was that in the buying department, or was that I guess the question here is, let me just backtrack. How did life pan out for you after college career wise, and what were you learning about where you wanted to be and how that mountaintop changed once you started thinking about career?
Yeah. So, they sell you on the internship of being a buyer, right? And so, but you have to start somewhere. And so the first job I had was an analyst. And an analyst is basically reports to a buyer and helps them plan out the inventory forecast for stores. And so instead of being the shiny object of like getting to pick the products that go in the stores, once the products are selected, you get to figure out how much you want to buy. And so in one way, like I was so focused on like getting to that buyer route. But in the other part of my brain, I was learning so much because you got millions of dollars of your budget to spend. And I ain't never had million. I don't think I ever even had more than like $200 in my checking account at one point in time to spend. So to have this like massive budget to spend, figure out how to spend it correctly, how to be accountable. I was learning so many like critical steps, but along the way, very, very, very early on in my career, within the first year, I noticed that the store was a one size fit all approach for everyone, and that there were huge gaps in what we provided to families of color. And
what made you realize that? Like, how was it just something you were thinking about, or was it so blatantly obvious?
So I was in apparel.
Okay.
Is where I started. I actually started in the shoes department, but I was in that was under the apparel department. So there were just certain things like fit when you think about apparel, and you think about women of color who have typically curvier body types. A lot of the products weren't necessarily created to fit our body types. And then when I thought about my family and my dad and him being like 6'4", there was nothing for like tall men in the stores. And there was definitely nothing for like big and tall men in the stores. When I thought about aesthetic, there was maybe 1 to 2 different aesthetics that the current target customer was going after, but that's not necessarily the clothes and type of aesthetic that like me and my friends wanted to wear. And so I just started asking these questions of like, hey, have we ever considered doing something differently with fit? Have we ever considered speaking differently from an aesthetic standpoint to different consumer bases? And people were just like, wow, like that's interesting. Tell me more. And so some people wanted to hear more, and some people were like, girl, do your job. You were here to like buy some shoes and do that. But I really leaned into the people that had a like listening ear and that were like, hey, we maybe aren't able to do something about that like right now, but I want you to keep thinking about that. And so when you're an analyst, what gets you from an analyst to a senior business analyst is that you have to do a project. And I ended up doing my project on the opportunity of all the different opportunities to go after different types of people within apparel.
Okay. So I want to ask you this because this was still very early on in your career, right? Mm-hmm. What were you doing to start building relationships? And I'm saying that because we know now that you have a stationery company and more, right? That was the first Black-owned stationery retail brand at Target. Mm-hmm. Target came back full circle, but I can only imagine that you had to have planted some seeds just by your good effort, the work that you were doing when you were first as an intern until, you left eventually. But like, how were you building those relationships early on in your career?
Well, Target is innately a relationship building company. Okay. So it's something that is really embedded into the culture, especially as you are looking to navigate your way up and through the ranks. And so I was watching what my counterparts were doing and watching the people that were like deemed as kind of, successful and the people to watch. And I was taking note. And so I was really big on grabbing coffee with, leaders upwards to build those relationships while also meeting alongside with my peers. I was a part of this group that was at Target that started a group for diverse hires where we kind of all helped cross-share information around how we can kind of unlock success at this huge company, right? And sometimes our experience looked a little bit different than our counterparts. And so we were all a part of this group to help each other. But I think the biggest thing was that I was always me.
Mm. And who was Jasmine at this point? I mean, it was you, but like, who are you?
Not afraid to ask questions, not willing to just accept something that I didn't understand, challenging the norms, raising red flags when I felt like things weren't right, being an advocate for myself and the ones that I loved around me, being an advocate for those who I knew that were going to come up behind me. And I think that for some people, again, they didn't love it. But for a lot of people, they respected the hell out of the fact that I was trying to make change for not only myself, but for my culture, my community, and for people who would also walk in that building after me. And that never changed. And I think when you don't waver from who you are, you start to build the right people around you that respect that. And that when you are moving along your career, they continue to be rallied behind you. And I think the same people that were there in my early days were the same people I left relationships with, as I ended my time at Target.
At any point during your early career journey, did you ever see yourself as an entrepreneur?
No. I actually talk a lot about, I saw myself as an entrepreneur's best friend. So when I had the job of doing multicultural beauty, I was really integral in launching and helping scale a lot of Black owned brands in the beauty space, also toys as well. And I enjoyed it so much. I thought that they had such fire, that they were building these dope brands, and I just wanted to help see them win. And I would not only do what I was supposed to do from my job standpoint, but like take the time to connect and build relationships like outside of the workplace to just talk about like strategy and how they could just build their brands up at Target, but then beyond Target, period. And so I always saw myself as like a little cheerleader for entrepreneurs. I never thought that I had the gumption to like go take the risk. I was always like, look, I like my 9 to 5. I like having this paycheck that comes, bi-weekly. It clears the expenses. And I'm good. I thought maybe one day I would have like a retail consulting business because again, that felt very like close to home.
Yeah.
But I truly didn't start dreaming about entrepreneurship until I left to go work for a small business.
I'm pretend I'm cueing some Jeopardy music here, like the transition music, right? I need to get a little soundboard so I can just like get the music ready to go, right? It's funny because that small business, I don't know if you mind if I mention the name. I'm only going to mention the name Urban Skin RX. I actually had Rachel Roth on the podcast. I want to say that had to be like back in maybe when you were there, 2000. It was before when you were there, 2018-ish.
Okay. Uh-huh.
It was funny, just like that business within itself, there's a lot there. What made you jump ship, right? You were already at Target, going into like the small business world. And tell me, like, how did that experience change your mind?
So much to unpack here. But I had just came off being the buyer for multicultural beauty and dolls, and I got my senior buyership. So, right, I'm like moving up the ranks, and I was the buyer for sun care and hand body lotion. So 2 extremely sexy categories, right? And I just remember sitting there being like, yes, I have a bigger responsibility. Yes, my title is greater. Yes, I'm doing all the right things to climb up the corporate ladder. But like what made me feel fulfilled in my job was centering my work around Black women. Like I felt so fulfilled, and I did not feel as fulfilled in that role, even though my North Star was like to make it up the corporate ladder at Target. And this was a step in that direction. I realized that I actually got pulled back away from my values. And so at the time I was considering going to work for a small brand that centered their work around women of color. And I had a couple of different brands kind of in my head that I wanted to talk to. And that brand was one that I had actually launched at Target when I was the buyer in the multicultural beauty seat. And I had sent out a couple of fillers to some of the brand founders being like, hey, I'm considering, leaving Target and moving into the small business space. If you ever need someone to run your retail sales business, let me know. And nothing came from those initial like text and phone calls. But then it ended up being that Urban Skin RX was looking to ramp up their sales in retail, and it was aligning with the time that I was also looking to leave. And so that was really my kind of reason for leaving Target to go into a small beauty brand, because I wanted to center my work back around Black women. When I got there, I had a huge learning experience. Like when you work for a small business, you have your job and then you have everything else that you get to see, right? Because there's just never enough hands on the business to like really just stay siloed to what you were actually hired to do. And what I learned was that like, if she can do it, I can do it. And
what do you mean?
Because I think you put like when you're not in it on the everyday, you put these like entrepreneurs that you deem as successful as like, oh my God, like they have to have like the hugest like team, or they have like, there's this machine that's behind them, right? Like you just imagine that but what you see when you go work for a small business, and now owning mine, it's really just someone who's passionate about what they do, that have figured out how to get a handful of people that believe in their dream and want to help them succeed. And it's more about the idea and about your ability to continue every day to show up for your idea than it is about like this big machine. I'm coming from Target. It takes 17,000 people to get Target moving.
One
right?
thing improved.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But like at a small company, you're like, no, that's just like, it's like 3 people making this work, right? And so at the top of 2020, when everything kind of shut down, I had the first time in like 5 years to just like breathe. I had been like running like crazy, traveling like crazy, like working like crazy, building up either strategies for Target or strategies for the new company that I was at. And I had a time to be like, well, what do I want to do? I have all of this free time. Like, what are my passions and dreams? And I went back to an idea that I had when I was sitting at multicultural desk, was that there was a gap within home and gifting for a brand that centered women of color. And I had asked at the time if that was something that I could look into. And they're like, look, girl, you Keke Palmer, you already got like 3 jobs. We're going to need you to focus on them. Trying to add a 4th job. And so I had this idea in my head, but I thought about it at that time from the lens of like, what would it look like if a retail brand did it?
Yeah.
Or what if a retail brand went and sought after a brand that was doing what I was doing? And I just started putting pen to paper of, well, what would it look like if I stopped doing it? If I started doing it and stopped waiting for a brand to come into the space that I felt like hit these needs.
Dream drivers, did you know Ford is sharing the inspiring stories of those behind the wheel who are accomplishing their goals, pursuing their dreams, and creating the world they want to live in? Built Ford Proud is highlighting Dee Bryant, a Ford driver who has shown strength in how she's breaking boundaries to create change in her field for all those around her. So Dee is a professional stunt driver who's been featured in over 100 films, movies, and shows. She began riding motorcycles at age 11. And get this, Dee always finds herself gravitating towards Ford vehicles as her personal ride when off screen. In fact, much of her stunt driving training took place in a Ford Mustang. Dee is one of few females and even fewer African-American female stunt drivers in the industry. She constantly battles against sexism, racism, and unfair representation as many productions try to get around hiring female drivers. Dee co-founded the Association of Women Drivers, a stunt driving school where she helps teach other women to stunt drive. She's just one of the many examples that show us dream drivers that Ford drivers come from all types of backgrounds and dream driving journeys. Learn more about Dee Bryant's story at Ford.com/builtfordproud. Breaking the mold, strengthening communities, creating change, real stories brought to you by Ford, Built Ford Proud. Hey dream drivers, ever since becoming a mom, life has changed for me in so many ways, and I've learned so much about what it takes to be a mother. One of the things I realized early on in this dream driving journey was how important having the right tools, aka diapers, in my toolkit is. When it comes to changing those dirty diapers, for me, it's all about making the smartest choice. I need reliability and quality, and Pampers gives me that. You may save a couple cents on other brands, but will you save time and convenience? Who wants more leaky diapers, more laundry because poop stains are not fun? And better yet, diaper rash? Not me. I don't worry about that with Pampers. There are other things you can save on, but honestly, your baby deserves the Pampers experience. I've sworn by Pampers with my son for the past 2 years. It's gentle on his skin, and I can trust that they can hold up throughout usage. As a busy dream driver already juggling so much, your diapers choice should be easy and worry-free. Make sure you download the Pampers Club app today to start earning free diapers. Dream drivers, Walgreens knows you need your medications, but sometimes what you really need is a prescription for more time with your family or friends, or just more time to do what you want on a Saturday afternoon. That's why Walgreens offers same-day RX delivery to where you are. So you can get more than just your meds. You can get your prescription to save time at the pharmacy. And when you have pharmacy questions, which let's face it, we all do, Walgreens will be there for you with a helpful 24/7 pharmacy chat. So when you need to know, which med do I take before bed again? Or, is it safe to have a glass of wine with my prescription? You can ask a Walgreens pharmacy expert that question no matter where you are or what time of day it is. And that gives you more than just answers. It gives you your prescription for peace of mind. Delivery is available on eligible prescriptions only. See details at walgreens.com/prescription delivery. So 2 things I'm hearing is that's super niche, right? It's super niche, but at the same time, it's super big, if that makes any sense, right? Like, there's so much opportunity, but you also really carved out a unique spot and a unique space for a unique set of women, right? Were you nervous? Because up until now, I mean, you had the consultancy background of understanding how the machines work, but you had never built a machine. What was your mindset at this point?
When I started the brand, I started as a side hustle. So I was still doing my head of sales job full time. And I really just wanted to put a product out there and see how people responded, right? And at the time, I was like not looking necessarily to get it into retail. I was like, this is just something that brings me joy, and I'm going to work on it every day when I have free time. So I think a lot of people start their companies and are like, I'm going to build a $20 billion hair care company in 10 years. I started my company a little bit different. I was like, I want to do something that brings me passion, brings me joy, aligned with my values, and centered to my purpose. And I want to work on this every day. And then the financials of it came later. But I think because I didn't put that pressure on myself and I was literally just leaning in with like focus on my values and my purpose, it felt fun, especially in those early days. Like, it was just really fun to log off of work and come home and do something that like really like made me happy. And I hadn't had that in a long time, to be honest. So that reduced a lot of the like upfront fear. And I really think that if a lot of people like focused on like what were their values and, you know, what actually brings them joy, it doesn't feel like work when it's something that feels like fun in the beginning stages. Now,
in the beginning,
now that we're at Target, and now that there's, you know, we have employees and, you know, you definitely have to hit your metrics to stay in retail, and you want your checks to clear so that your people feel good too. Like, there is more pressure, but it still feels fun, but it's not that same like carefree fun from day one, you know?
Yeah, no, I definitely understand. And it's funny because you mentioned early on in the interview how when you were a kid, you were always interested in the creative, but you felt like you weren't like, you weren't a drawer, you weren't an artist per se, right? Mm-hmm. But you're able to still pursue something creative because stationery, right? Mm-hmm. The first iteration, you have to have someone to design it. So how did you approach that part? And it was a pandemic, mind you, right? 2020, top of 2020. So you were, was it before March or after March?
This was after March.
Girl, so you decided to create a product-based paper business.
I know.
In the starting of a pandemic when the supply chain world was.
Well, it was only supposed to be 2 weeks. It was only supposed to be 2 weeks. So,
you know, it's funny. I have this post. I have this post from my Instagram where I had posted me and my bestie quarantining together, right? Who knew? But I think that naivety, like that naivety, being naive in a way. Imagine if you you would have thought that it would have lasted 3 years. Maybe that would have changed your approach to everything.
Yeah, you know, so kind of going back to your first question of like, as someone who's not creative by hand and starting a design-based business, like, girl, what you thinking? And that was honestly a little bit of the like fear that I had in the beginning is like, a lot of times stationery businesses are started by designers, and it's from them drawing, and then they have art and they're selling art prints, and they're like, okay, well, what else can I put this on? And like stationery tends to be like a next step for them. But then I started looking at some of the background stories behind like Minted, and I'm looking at the background stories behind UB, and I'm looking at the background stories behind Mead, and I'm like, wait, these are successful big businesses that didn't start because the entrepreneur was this like avid artist that, built their brands. There was people that saw a white space for a consumer that was an untapped, niche, and they went after it. And so I let that go very early on. But to build a business in a pandemic is not for the faint of heart, because you don't have the trade shows that you can go to and find suppliers. Like, you're not able to like meet, people live and determine if they're a good fit for your brand. You're having to do a lot virtually. And in the middle of all of this, the price for everything, including paper has not changed prices in like 25 years. And then the price of paper right after I started like tripled, right? So again, going back to my skill sets that I learned early on in my career is, how do you take these big problems I had, and every day just kind of became like, okay, here's another thing I have to solve. Here's another thing I have to solve. And again, it was fun because at the point at my day job, I could do that on autopilot. Like, I understand retail. I understand how to pitch to retail. Like, I had been there for a while. So things that I was doing that were my core responsibilities, I felt like were on autopilot, versus this was something like new and fun for me to be able to get into the weeds in every day.
How did you want to make sure that Be Rooted at this time was different? Right? Because you get a notebook anywhere, right? Were you thinking about what would make it different, or were you thinking about where it would end up?
I think the main thing that I wanted to do was to create a brand that centered women of color, and that also interweaved both positive, uplifting messaging with reflective artwork.
Okay.
And I felt like that was the piece that I had not seen in the industry, was really kind of focusing on those two things together. And as someone who has grown up in the era of, I feel like, so much messaging that is always downplaying and like knocking down and like tearing down Black women, I wanted to be a place where she could come and feel home. And like, that was really like my North Star.
So one of the biggest things a lot of people often struggle with initially, right, is building that initial consumer base and just getting the hype up around the brand. Like, you had worked with all these brands that had been around for a while, right? But here you come. Hey, I'm Jasmine. I had Be Rooted, right? Like, how were you going to get the word out about the company? And what was people's initial response?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I remember like doing things super grassroots. So I literally took my entire like email base, anyone in my phone, and I like announced to them that I announced to them that I was launching this brand. I was launching it on June 4th, and that I would love if everyone could put, and I sent them all the same graphic.
Okay.
And I was like, if you could share this graphic in your stories all at the same time, to me, that makes it seem like everyone's talking about like the same.
Yes, creating the hype, right? Creating an organic press moment.
Yeah, when you don't have a budget, because I didn't have no money. And so like that was the thing that I did very, very early on, was just trying to get as many of the people within my circle to be like the first like evangelist. And I remember we ended up selling out what I had initially ordered within that like first weekend. And I think I went on vacation that first weekend because I was like, oh, I'm just going to launch this brand. Like, not like we're new, like brand new, like we launched yesterday. So I went on vacation because I remember it being, and orders were just coming in. And I was like, hold on now. We gonna have to get back so we can ship these out. But
you have enough product.
No. And I was like on the phone with the factory, trying to see if we could get some reorders. And so I was like, oh, okay, like this is something that people like. And like one thing that I talk about in some interviews that's a little bit non-traditional is I actually started the brand without a logo. Because I feel like a lot of people spend a lot of time getting the logo and making the website look really pretty and like not focus on the product. And so I was like, if I sell X amount of units, then I'll go back and do all the branding. And so to me, it was just really important to like prove out, like, do people like this? And so that was early stages. And then we had the opportunity to get into Target. I still think at the time we were approached by Target, I think I maybe had like 1,000 or 2,000 followers on Instagram. It was real light because it was about 3 months after we had launched.
That is amazing, though. Like thinking about it, right?
We ended up getting a lot of good organic like buzz and traffic and PR early on. And so when we got the conversation about 3 months after we launched, and then we knew we were going to go in March of 2021, which would have been 9 months after we launched. And I was like, I don't have the money to pay for the ads because at the same time, the iOS crisis was happening. So like ads weren't adding like they used to. I was like, I can't afford a celebrity influencer. And I am not overnight going to just get like millions of people to follow me. And so very early on, I actually invested in my first PR company, who was really integral to help positioning the brand and like helping create buzz, at least from a press standpoint, about the brand, when we kind of couldn't afford some of those other metrics.
So I just have a question about Target too. Was it the person that you had pitched the idea to that came back and said, hey, girl, you know how you said?
No, I wish. That would be amazing for my movie that's going to come out. But no, I actually, so interesting enough, like there's 10,000 people that work in headquarters. So
yeah,
so many people. And the person I ended up pitching was actually someone that I had like never met before. But what was really helpful was that when I was a buyer, I had worked with brokers, and brokers are the people that kind of help pitch your brand on your behalf to retail buyers. So I had a couple of them who had reached out and saw that I had launched something and was like, wait, this is really cool. We would love to represent you. And so I had a good relationship with the person that I ended up using as my broker, which I think always helps because I feel like they really went to bat for me and like helped pitch the brand in a way that the buyer like ended up loving it. But it also aligned with he was looking for a brand like mine at the time. And so I feel like it's a little bit of like luck, values aligning, connection points, and all the things that end up making that Target partnership come to life.
What don't people understand about what it takes to get into big retail? Or not even what it takes to get into big retail, but what it takes to sustain that relationship?
I know if I say getting into retail is not hard, people are going to be like, yeah, girl, whatever. But really the hard work is sustaining.
That's because, that's what I hear a lot from a lot of people. Like I've had like the Lip Bar, which I know that I interviewed her, I think at the very beginning of that Target relationship, right? Everyone always says like, you get the deal, you're pumped. Then you're like, oh shit, I have to fulfill these orders. I have to like, get it to the warehouse. Like there's so many other things. You have to make sure that it sells through within the store, the merchandising. There's so much that goes into it once you're there. So I'd love to know your POV on what were your challenges or what you had to learn being on the other side now.
Building up enough buzz to drive people in the store is a constant everyday battle.
I see your social media videos, like where sometimes you go into the stores and you'll fix the shelves. Yeah. You'll make sure it looks good.
Because first off, customers literally take like 5 seconds at shelf to determine like if anything even catches their eye. So you really have to stand out. Secondarily, the buyer's job is to always find like the coolest, hottest new brand, right? And so the landscape of who you're competing against on an everyday basis is constantly changing. And so you spend a lot of time on like creating relevant, engaging content to try to bring people into your family. And in the last 3 years, the cost of acquiring a customer has just skyrocketed with the iOS, kind of hiccups within Facebook and Meta ads. Um, Out of home wasn't really working because people at the time were out of home.
They were not even outside.
Radio is shifting to podcasts, but then podcast people are not necessarily like sitting at home, like ready to digest at the time. They can be on the move. So really getting a customer's attention is extremely difficult. And so it's not only is it extremely difficult to drive them to your website, but it's more difficult to drive them to retail. And so I think that's just the piece, like every day I'm always constantly thinking about like, how do we continue to create, relevant, engaging content that, makes people fall in love with who we are. And then at retail, it's expensive. You have to buy the product before you get paid from a retailer. So you're constantly playing a cash flow game. If you want those really pretty displays that you see at the end of aisle, those things aren't cheap. Those also cost a significant amount of money. Everyone is in a deal finding. So every promo or markdown that you get, or if someone returns something, you as a vendor, you pay for that. And so, it's a really, really expensive game to be in. It's highly rewarding though, because you get to expose your brand to thousands of people on a daily basis that would have never had the chance to kind of see you otherwise. But it's definitely, you have to know your numbers like the back of your hand. And I think that if you don't stay on top of your numbers and you don't know, what success looks like, and you don't know how to continue to keep fueling the beast, it can get very choppy.
No, that's just, I love that you're being real about that, because I think on the flip side, there are people who are listening who have been creatives all their life, right? And they don't know the number side. And so I think that can be the part that then intimidates them, right? What advice would you have for that person who needs to better understand and have a better grasp on the data behind their brand?
There's always a partner. So you can bring on a consultant, you can bring on like a sales or, operations person. I think it's important as a business owner for you to be a little bit dangerous with every part of your business. And so there's way too many books, way too many podcasts, way too many webinars.
Not this one though. This one's good. This one.
But like, there's just in the sense of like saying you don't know, it's no longer an excuse, because you can tap into so many resources that help you gain knowledge, some free, some paid, that you should be able to know a little bit about everything for yourself.
No, I love that you say that. And I often say, like, when I ask people what's the hardest part about starting and about what's the hardest part about dream driving, it's not the little stuff like data that you said, right? Like, for you, what do you think was the biggest thing you had to learn about Jasmin, the person, along this journey?
Jasmin, the person, likes for things to be done efficiently, on time, with purpose, and like succinctly. And when you are running a business, every time you get back on track, someone's throwing a tomato at you, a banana peel to make you slip. I had to learn that everything's not black and white, and that there's beauty in color. Now, I don't like to play in gray, but there's beauty in color. And so, yes, I want to have all of our marketing materials done, 6 months in advance, so that everyone on all my teams have everything that they need way ahead of time. But if there's an opportunity for us to work on a project that gets slid into there that messes up that timeline, like, I can't just say no to that too. So I've had to learn to be a lot more flexible and less rigid when it comes to like perfecting things.
Have you ever felt like giving up?
No. And it's really interesting because I hear a lot of people on either podcasts or like clips on TikTok that talk about like them wanting to give up. And there has not been a moment in this business that I have felt like Now there's the other things like this wellness journey, losing this 40 pounds. Like instead of me just going ahead and trying to do it the right way, so I need to go,
no, girl, don't cross over. Don't do. I mean, let me stop. I support whatever you support.
No,
but you know what I mean. Like,
there's other things that I have, been like, why am I still trying it this way? But this business, every single day, I love giving 110% of it, and I realize that, like, we're only almost 3 years in, and so there's probably going to be a moment. We're probably still in like the newlywed stage.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that down the road that there will be some points in which I feel like that. But like honestly, every single day I am just even more excited about like what's to come with this brand.
Yeah, I think like for my podcast, I started in 2016. I think I'm at like the plateau stage where, where you're doing the same thing every day. You're like, it's how you felt when you were at your corporate job, but you could do it on autopilot. And so for me, it's like, how do I get back to that point, right? How do I get back to, not saying I'm not excited to do this interview, which I am, but it's also like, okay, how can I reinvent? How can I put something new out there? How can I make sure that I'm still being relevant to my listeners today? Because who I was in 2016 is not who I am today. And I'm sure my listeners have changed as well. So that's just something I also resonate with, is like, there may be a moment, but it's like finding that thing every day that you're working towards and that you're moving towards is so important. So I want to kind of close out this interview with the name of your company, Be Rooted, right? In the beginning of this interview, you mentioned how you were, your parents were in the military. You were in the military. Was it your father or both your parents?
My father.
Okay, your father was in the military. You moved around a lot. Then you finally came back to the States and were rooted, right? Why do you think it's so important for us as Black women, as our community, to have this rooting, this centering?
If you don't know who you are, then anyone can come in and tell you who you are. And so when I started this brand, I wanted people to be rooted in culture and to be rooted in who they were, and to know that this is a brand that sees them, believes in them, and hears them. And to me, like every day when I look at our products, like it reminds me of not only like who I am, but like who my culture is. And I feel like you can pick up a journal, and depending on your mood for the day, there's one that's going to speak to you, right? But then also I think there's just like this really like powerful knowing of like being rooted in like your beliefs and in your values and in your purpose. And for me, once I started aligning my values and my purpose into my daily life, I felt like everything just started coming together. And I think it's really important for us to all like every day try to like get ourselves closer and closer to our values and purpose. And so for me, that was creating a brand that centered Black women. For other people, that might mean other things. But the more I'm, rooted in who I think I was destined to be and put on this earth, I believe that it will create more happiness and joy for myself on an everyday basis.
And it's crazy how like this idea came from a moment of stillness, right? Of you having that time to take a breather, to like sit back, to enjoy all the stuff that you have been working for years to build, right? Yeah. And so it's the irony of like you built
seriously.
it, right? You had to have the busyness to get to the point where you could even just appreciate the stillness and that peace, and that's when things clicked.
And I didn't even know that I wasn't, like, I thought while leaving Target to go work for my next job, I was centering myself. But I didn't realize that I was still just chasing after and aligning to someone else's values and purpose. And that I hadn't even given myself the time to ask myself what was meant for me. And I believe everyone deserves a time of stillness. Now, I mean, the pandemic was crazy, so like, let's not repeat that.
No.
But there's, whether it's going on a wellness retreat for the weekend, whether it's literally just like turning your phone off for the weekend and like sitting and actually having conversations with yourself. That was one thing that the pandemic like allowed me to do, is like 100% understand who I am and 100% understand what I wanted out of this life. Because I literally could only talk to myself for months.
Yeah. No, it's just something now that we're out of it, hopefully, right? It's interesting to look back at just how much that period, I think it changed the world. It changed individuals. It just changed the way we view society. So yeah, and it helped us get rooted because it helped you build your roots. And now you have a tree. Okay.
Absolutely. I love that. Let's do some snaps.
Yes. So last question, Jasmine. If you want to be a dream driver, you have to have your keys to success. So can you tell our dream drivers 3 things that you think they need in their toolkit before they hit the road?
Ooh. I think the first thing is that you have to spend some time understanding who you are and what your values are and centering yourself around that. I would say second thing is building the people in your tribe that are going to kind of help be your everyday cheerleaders and help build you to the next level. You can't do anything alone. You cannot do anything alone. You're going to need people in your corner. And so you need to identify who those people would be. And then I would say the last thing is take inventory of what your zone of genius is and what your zone of genius isn't. And
that second part, right?
And when you identify what it's not, you have to seek out the resources, the tools, the people that are going to help add little bits of nuggets into that. Because you can't just, I think a lot of us just like ignore that part and they're just like, well, that's just a part of me. It's like, but you can't, as you own a business, you have to do everything in the beginning. And so you have to continue to build up your strengths on the side of where you're not as, prevalently successful in. And so that will be, I think, your biggest unlock is that last piece is like, don't just ignore what you're not good at and actively work on a daily basis to get a little bit better at it.
Thank you. I love all that. Spend time centering yourself, make sure you're building your tribe and identifying what is and what isn't that zone of genius. Jasmine, can you tell our dream drivers where they can find Be Rooted online? How many Target stores you're in? Like, let us know how we can support you and join the community.
Yeah, so you can find us at berootedco.com. We are at berootedco on all social channels. And, we're at a Target near you. We got a little bit of our products in all stores, some in select stores, but they're all on target.com. So definitely make sure you check them out.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I hope our dream drivers enjoyed this journey, listening, hearing your dream driving journey as much as I have.
Thank you.
All right, so that's a wrap for this episode of Dreams and Drive. I hope you enjoyed our guests' dream driving journey as well as listening to their keys to success. If you love this episode, you know what to do. Please make sure that you are following us. We are at Dreams and Drive across social media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So make sure you're sharing this episode, posting it to your Instagram stories, texting it to a friend, sharing on LinkedIn, wherever you are or online. Just pay this forward and share this with somebody. We really appreciate it. And all the sharing that you do helps us grow our community. If you want to join our email newsletter, The Keys, and get weekly updates delivered to your inbox, just go to dreamsanddrive.com/join. That's dreamsanddrive.com/join. And lastly, if you know somebody who would be great for this show, or if you are someone who would be great for this show, please go to dreamsanddrive.com/pitch. I'm always accepting new guests. I'm always accepting new pitches. So I love to see those pitch requests coming in. Keep dreaming, keep driving, and we'll chat again in the next episode. Bye, guys.